Hey guys, this is Jack with Cosmic Road. How you doing? Wanted to talk to you about the current state of ufology and the UFO news that has come out in recent days and weeks. So let's talk about it. This is Jack, of course, with Cosmic Road. I talk about UFOs and the paranormal. Please hit like, please subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified of future videos. You don't want to miss a thing. And of course, comment and let me know what you're thinking. What are the UFO news items that you have seen in recent days that have really got you excited? I've been seeing that Representative Tim Burchett is now talking very openly about reverse engineering alien technology. And he's even kind of roped Matt Gaetz into it. And that's very exciting to have actual sitting congressmen talking about reverse engineering UFO technology. To me, this is huge. This is major news. And I can't wait to see where it goes. That actual representatives are taking this stuff seriously. Just, a few years ago, this would have been a giggle factor of 1,000 for any sitting congressman to talk about. But, such is the magic of what Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon and others have done. And Tom DeLonge, you can't discount Tom DeLonge. I'd never even heard of him before 2017. But he really is a big part of all of this. And, all those guys, Jim Semivan, all those TTSA guys, Hal Puthoff. I think those are the three founding members of TTSA, Hal Puthoff, Jim Semivan, and Tom DeLonge. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, I wanted to talk about Lou Elizondo replied to Jeremy Corbell. I did a piece yesterday on an interview between Jeremy Corbell and Tim Burchett on Newsmax. And apparently other people have noticed this as well. And there's an article in Liberation Times talking about it and also talking about Lou's response to it. So let me just go over that a little bit. I'm not going to read the whole article, but a journalist and filmmaker, Jeremy Corbell, has challenged the U.S. Senate Committee on Appropriations to audit alleged U.A.P. special access programs, citing Lockheed Martin as an example. While appearing on Newsmax yesterday alongside Tim Burchett, who is also a U.A.P. transparency advocate, Corbell referenced the committee's chair, Patty Murray, and its vice chair, Susan Collins, in his challenge. I would also like to encourage you, Congressman, talking about Tim Burchett, with whatever power that you do have with your colleagues, to do one thing in particular, Corbell says. Right now, we have the U.S. Senate Committee on Appropriations. They have jurisdiction over the spending. We have Senator Patty Murray, we have Senator Susan Collins, who are able to audit the special access programs, such as ones that are held like you're talking about at Lockheed Martin. And, they're talking about these secret programs that reverse engineer UFOs. And Corbell also named Lieutenant General Dimitri Henry, Director of Intelligence from the U.S. Joint Chief, as key to transparency efforts. So I would like to include in this investigation, which I ask of you, for example, Lieutenant General Dimitri Henry. As you know, he is the current Director for Intelligence Joint Staff J2. And this is what Corbell is telling Tim Burchett. He's saying J2, they have authority and management over the intelligence community, and they should be asking questions if we do have UFO exploitation programs, what I'm calling the silver bullet. They should be able to ask of Lockheed and other contractors, what are they working on? Yes, indeed. Wouldn't we all like to know what Lockheed Martin is working on? I mean, Lockheed Martin helped build Area 51. I mean, they have been in this deep forever. But Lou Elizondo saw this interview and he had some stuff to say about it. So let's talk about what Lou said. Lou Elizondo, former director of ATIP, backed up Corbell's comments, telling Liberation Times, I applaud the effort to get to the bottom of any legacy efforts to exploit UAP materials and have stated in the past my position on the matter. I would also go a step further and not limit the focus of the inquiry to just one aerospace company, but to several others that have likely played a key historical role in this endeavor. Yeah, and that brings to mind a really interesting thing that George Knapp had to say on the podcast Weaponized that he and Jeremy Corbell do. George Knapp was relaying this story that he has been sitting on for a long time. I think his name is Hal O'Donnell, who was one of the directors of EG&G, which is the private contractor company that ran, at least partly, Area 51. And Hal O'Donnell, if I'm getting his name right, said to George that there was a live alien at Area 51. Now, I'm assuming that's past tense and that he's talking about the being that is generally known as EB or EB. It stands for it's EBE, extraterrestrial biological entity number one. I think he's EB1 is what people call him in that story, where there was a survivor of the crash at Roswell, and they brought him in and they tried to interact with him and work on him, and he was injured. And I want to say they eventually brought in like a plant specialist or something because he was more plant like, but I could be misremembering. But in any case, they were ultimately able to communicate with him. I think the story goes that originally he wasn't very honest with them. He lied to them and misled them, but eventually they were able to get what they thought was real information out of him. And he wanted to contact his people, and they did try to contact his people. Unfortunately, he passed away, and it was shortly after that or it was during that time. I'm not sure what year he died in, but it was around that time, 1952, the UFO flyover of Washington, D.C. And I think there's actually kind of a series of flyovers, which may have led to the meeting between Eisenhower and one or more races of being in 1953, and then again at Holman Air Force Base at Airfield in 54. So anyway, that's the story of Evie. Somewhere around then he died, and he did not ultimately. He wasn't restored to his people. I think that is the story that O'Donnell is telling. But anyway, that is another private company that probably, I don't think EG&G is really still around anymore, but that is definitely an historical avenue to explore what EG&G knew, because obviously they knew a lot. They were in this from the beginning, just like Lockheed Martin. And it may be easier to get access to their records because they're not around anymore. Maybe the protections aren't there, or maybe the data is lost and it was destroyed when EG&G went away. So I don't know, but so that's one example of the companies Lou Elizondo could be talking about. If you're just joining me, this is Jack with Cosmic Road. Please hit like, please subscribe, smash that bell to be notified of future videos. And let me know what you're thinking. What do you think about Lou's comments in response to what Jeremy Corbell said on the Newsmax interview with Representative Tim Burchett? And yeah, so really cool, really cool. I love that video. I love that interview, and it was really fun. The interplay between Jeremy Corbell and Burchett when they were giving each other thumbs up. I like that. That was cool. Yeah, Christian says, "What's up, Jack? Love to the stars." Yeah, right. I mean, they made such a huge difference. They really did. I mean, without Tom DeLonge, a goofy pop star, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. I don't know anything about his music, so maybe he's just really the bomb. But it kind of annoys me. They keep on calling him a rock star, but it's not. The few minutes that I've listened to of Blink, whatever it is. It doesn't sound like rock to me. It sounds more like pop. But yeah, but hats off to Tom DeLonge. Thank God for Tom DeLonge. He really evolved this whole conversation in a huge way, a massive way, and he had help from the government. The government helped him do it. He got big wigs like Jim Semivan and Hal Pudolph and the one of the former heads of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. What was his name? Or is his name Steve Justice? And of course, that's not even including Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon. Unknown says, don't believe everything you're told. Absolutely. And that goes into my second talking point, or third, whatever it is now, going back to Hal O'Donnell. So he tells this story, the former director or one of the directors of EG&G, who is basically running Area 51, who tells George Knapp the story of this live alien there. Well, years later, he is forced he's intimidated by the men in black, first of all, and then he is forced to recant his story. And then suddenly his story changes, and it's no longer aliens in the ship at Roswell that were recovered. The beings in the ship were suddenly victims of Joseph Mengele, the evil Nazi doctor. And so there's so many stories about the Germans in World War II and their connection to the beings and aliens. There's the Vril Society, and that part of the story checks out and seems to be legit. But where it goes from there goes in some crazy directions. Operation High Jump, which was a real operation. But there are so many various versions to that story. If you're familiar with that story, Admiral Byrd led two war fleets, essentially, after World War II to Antarctica we don't know what they went there for. One version is the Germans had this alien technology and they established themselves in Antarctica because it was only in the last part of the war that they actually got the stuff to work. And, they lost, the Third Reich lost, but a few Germans were able to hold themselves up in Antarctica with this crazy technology. And Admiral Byrd went to stamp them out. That is one version of the story. Another is that it was a simple scientific, expedition on Admiral Byrd's part, and also that the German, area of Antarctica was actually opposed to the Nazi war effort, and they were enemies of the Third Reich. They were actual scientists and opposed all that. So, that's one. It goes on and on and on to the Nazis on the moon and all that kind of stuff. So that's there are various narratives of that. Is any of that real? I don't know if any of that is real. However, because the Men in Black forced Hal O'Donnell to recant his story and to change the story into it being Germans and German victims flying around in UFOs, the government was trying to put out this story that it was Germans responsible for UFOs. So how much of any of the German UFO narrative can we trust? How much of that is actual disinformation put out by the United States government? Because we know they did it once. Did they do it again? I think that's entirely likely that the U.S. government has been doing stuff like that for a long time, seeding false narratives and false information into the UFO community. And that is one glaring example of it, is all these German UFO stories. How much of that is actual deliberate disinformation from the U.S. government? Anyway, so when Unknown says don't believe everything you're told, absolutely, because is it Hal O'Donnell? I think it's Hal O'Donnell. O'Donnell is my recollection of it, Christian. But anyway, don't believe everything you're told because there is a massive amount of disinformation out there. Really is. It's really disheartening trying to get to the truth of all this stuff when there are so many false seeds deliberately planted. But yeah, get in here. This is Jack talking about the latest UFO news. It's been a really interesting few weeks. We've got the torpedo or the missile UFO that Jeremy Corbell released just a few days ago, and it's a series of photos that you can stitch together into a video, and a very short video of this oblong object moving across a war zone that was officially labeled by the U.S. military as a UAP. I mean, this is war footage from I believe, a drone. Correct me if that came from some other vehicle, but the U.S. military knows what a missile looks like, and they didn't think this was a missile. So I think that was a genuine UFO that Jeremy Corbell shared in that episode of Weaponized, which was just, I think, the most recent episode. He got a lot of flack for that, people calling it a missile, but the U.S. military knows what a missile is, and they did not think it was a missile. So very interesting. Of course, that doesn't mean it's alien. It could have been a reverse engineered alien technology drone from the U.S. or somebody else, but it's very, very interesting. Let's see. Christian says, yeah, I know they talked about it. Yeah, the Men in Black. That's absolutely right. They are diabolical. And there seems to be two different sorts of the Men in Black. There's the human Men in Black, and then there's the inhuman Men in Black. There's so many crazy stories about the inhuman Men in Black, and just the weird non sequiturs they do, and they're just weird. They do weird things of squatting and relieving themselves in before other people. I mean, I just weird, weird. They not even an alien that had studied human behavior would know not to do that. So that's just odd. It's just so weird. The Men in Black are weird. The alien Men in Black are even weirder, but they do seem to perform the same function, suppressing UFO information and knowledge and intimidating witnesses into silence. So the Men in Black, human and inhuman, seem to be on the same side. So again, that's one more piece of evidence that the government is working with the beings, and not just the U.S. government, but potentially other governments as well. It seems to be some sort of consortium or multinational effort, although it seems to be led by the U.S., but at, more speculation than anything else. Christian says, I think that slowed down ever since 2017. What slowed down? The Men in Black? Christian says, did you know Terry Lovelace was getting harassed by black helicopters? And then Lou and Tom visited him and the helicopters stopped. Wow, I didn't know that. I did know he was being harassed by the helicopters, but I didn't know they stopped after Lou and Tom visited him. That's awesome. I hope that's true. That's a great story. Alejandro says, let's see what we get on the next Weaponized. I know, right? I'm looking forward to Weaponized every week now. I got two shows that I'm watching now, Weaponized and Mandalorian. Yeah, I'm a big Star Wars geek. Sorry. Erisby, a guess at the riddle. That's a cool name. What's with Lou Elizondo and Gary Nolan having studied immunology? I have a crazy theory, but perhaps it's too wild. Nothing's too wild for me, man. Lay it on me. Lay it on me. But yeah, that is interesting. You don't look at Lou and think that guy studied immunology, but he did. He did. Lou's a sharp guy. He's a really smart guy, and the truth whispers, as he likes to say. What does that mean? I would love to know. And how is he whispering? He's been whispering for years now. He'll dropping little breadcrumbs in what he's saying. What exactly is he trying to tell us? And also, okay, another piece of news to me, and I think for some of you as well, is that Gary Nolan, talking about Gary, is apparently an experiencer, not just an experiencer, in the general sense of the term, but an alien abductee or contactee. Yeah, he did not say that directly. I don't want to misquote what he said, but he did say that he had apparently what seems to have been gray type aliens in his bedroom as a little child that told him to go to sleep and seems to have rendered him unconscious. And then he has had lifelong experience in contact with the beings ever since, if not before. So to me, aliens putting him to sleep as a child in his bedroom. They were in his bedroom. They weren't there to measure the drapes. You know what I'm saying? They were there for him, and they were rendering him unconscious. And that he's had lifelong contact with the beings. So I don't really see any other explanation for for those series of events other than Gary Nolan being an alien abductee or contactee. Let me know what you think. By the way, if you're just getting here, thanks for coming. I appreciate it. This is Jack with Cosmic Road. I talk about UFOs and the paranormal. Please hit like, please subscribe, and yeah, if you want to, chip in and support the channel and keep me motivated to keep doing this, consider leaving a super chat or super thanks. That'd be awesome. Let's see. Let's see. Jake from Not State Farm says hello. Hello. Hey, hello, Jake. Christian says, Jack, go listen to James Landoli. I love James. Well, what did you say? For the story about the helicopters. Okay, I will. I will. I did know that Terry Lovelace was harassed by helicopters. And, I feel so bad for Terry because he had his best buddy. What was his name? Toby or something like that. And, they had this experience together. And afterwards, I imagine both of them were hypnotized. I know Terry was. They wanted to ensure that he didn't have any photographic evidence of the beings because in his experience, he saw 50 or more U.S. military and government people aboard a giant UFO that he was taken onto. So, yet another piece of evidence that the government is working with the beings at a very high level. We're not talking about just a low level, like some, suggestions planted in somebody's mind or waving at a UFO in the air or touching down, the Eisenhower meeting where they just talk for a few minutes and maybe you sign an agreement and are gone. No, they're working together. They are working together. There was the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works engineer that I talked about a few weeks ago who worked on the SR-71 Blackbird and, a Skunk Works Lockheed Martin. And he had buddies that were working with the beings. He wasn't working with them directly, but his buddies would tell him about their experiences. And they were working with the beings to develop what they called a training device to train U.S. pilots how to fly UFOs or UFO-like vehicles. And it was shortly after that the ARVs, to use Mark McClandish's terminology, began to be seen, these human-flown UFOs. And they would sit down and people would see them here and there. And there's multiple reported cases of them. John Keel reported on them. And people would come out of them. And not the Nordics, not the Pleiadians or, whatever they are, but, guys in Air Force uniforms. And, really interesting. Really interesting. I forgot where I was going with that, but yeah, here Terry Lovelace. Yeah, I was gonna say there's just very sad about Terry Lovelace when they hypnotized him and his buddy. Was it Toby? Correct me if I'm wrong on the Toby thing, but it seems like some sort of hypnotic suggestion was planted in their minds by the military so that they would no longer be friends. For some reason, after they were both hypnotized, if Toby was, but after Terry was hypnotized, they had some instinctual dislike of each other. They didn't want to be with each other anymore. So very sad. So not only was the military suppressing this, but they were even willing to break up friendships to do it. I mean, why that should surprise me, I don't know why. I guess I'm just an innocent, but I mean, I'm pretty sure they murdered people over this. So what's breaking up a friendship, right? Yeah, okay. Risby says, remember Terrence McKenna speculated about fungi and consciousness? Yeah. The idea is that consciousness, or at least the human version, is caused by some microbe symbiont or symbiote, I guess, altering our antenna. Okay. Consciousness is caused by a microbe altering our antenna. Well, that's really interesting. I do think that's kind of how hallucinogens work, like psilocybin mushrooms, and other things like ayahuasca, which I'm familiar with, and mushrooms as well. Honestly, I think that if our consciousness is non-local, to use the sciencey kind of phrasing, if we have souls that are coming from outside of this reality, as I believe is the case, then our brains are kind of like the filters for that consciousness coming into this body. That's the way I visualize it and think about it. And so our brains are these filters. And if you take certain substances, and don't do drugs are bad. But if you do that, it can alter the filter, alter your perceptions, and maybe more can come through from the home plane or source or whatever you want to call it. But I hadn't heard, or if I have, I've forgotten that speculation by Terence McKenna, who I think very well of. He was a brilliant guy. Risby says, but maybe there are new waves or multiple competing species, a sort of panspermia by spores, apparently fungi, spores or fungi, spores are resistant to the vacuum. Yeah, I've heard that. Very, very interesting. Let's see. All right. Yeah. Other interesting news items that have come up recently are the scoop by Project Leak, where he interviewed this great guy and had all these photos and videos of the dragons, as he called them, because at first he thought they were dragonflies when he was getting these things on his camera, but he quickly was able to debunk that. And there's these very tiny alien craft or anomalous craft, whatever they are, tiny, just like a few inches across or a foot across, and the seem to be drones or something, and they will buzz any object, whether it's a bird or a balloon or a plane, over 150 feet. He says that they'll go below that, but especially above that. And they're all over the place. They seem to have certain localities where they are especially heavy, like was it San Marino? And but yeah, these tiny little UFOs will buzz any object over 150 feet, and they're just all over the place, and they're just everything over 150 feet. But they move so fast you can't really see them. But if you use the special fancy cameras that he has, you can create what he calls, or the name is interpolations of these videos, where you can see this extremely fast moving object, this tiny fast moving object buzzing like just inches away from any object over 150 feet in the air. And I've talked before about, is it possible they have contributed to some of these air disasters or these air shows? And I don't think we can know, because they buzz everything. So correlation doesn't equal causation, because they're everywhere. And just because you saw one of these dragons buzzing a ship or a aircraft that then crashed doesn't mean anything, because they buzz every craft. I can't speak. Yeah, so we can talk about the paper with Sean Kirkpatrick and Avi Loeb, where they, I love Avi Loeb. I'm so glad that he's part of the conversation and is helping bring some legitimacy, some further legitimacy to the UFO topic, and is opening a new avenue of research with Project Galileo, where this Harvard scientist is looking into UFOs, and he's got a funded team to research UFOs. Of course, he's a very mainstream science guy, and he's looking at everything from a very mainstream science point of view. And in the paper that he and Sean Kirkpatrick wrote, it continues that tradition of looking at everything in a very mainstream way. But Sean should know better. He is the director of ARROW, the Pentagon's new UFO program. That this whole grassroots ufology movement over the last few years, triggered by Lou and Chris and Jim Semivan and Tom DeLonge and all of us, finally pressuring Congress and getting Congress to take this stuff seriously, and finally getting this program passed. ARROW, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. It is specifically designed to look at anomalous objects. All non-anomalous objects are referred elsewhere, and it looks at all anomalous objects coming from land, sea, and air and space, and it's all domain. So, Sean Kirkpatrick has access to a lot of data, all of ATIP's historical data, one would imagine, all of OSAP's historical data, one would imagine. So, in especially the OSAP stuff, there's a wealth of anomalous stuff. But even in the ATIP stuff, there's a wealth of anomalous stuff, objects moving in ways that we can barely describe, let alone understand. So, how can you approach that from a mainstream science point of view? Because the paper's point that they released just very recently was that we need to try to use conventional science and apply that to the study of UFOs, and we should look at UFOs through the lens of conventional science. And how does that make any sense? These are, by definition, anomalous objects. So, how, I mean, even in the new terminology for U.A.P is unidentified anomalous object. Or phenomena. So how can you use conventional science to do what is by definition unconventional? So I think Sean Kirkpatrick knows better. Avi Loeb can be excused as being a mainstream science guy for looking at it from a mainstream science point of view. But Sean Kirkpatrick has access to the data. He knows better. So I think that he was using Avi Loeb as a screen, as a veneer to advance this agenda that is debunking, or not debunking exactly, but is suppressing real information about UFOs and suppressing interest in it as well. And, also slowing things down, throwing a wrench in the cogs, as it were. So I just really don't like Sean Kirkpatrick. I have no love for Sean. I'm sorry. I was really hopeful for Sean Kirkpatrick. I was hoping that he would be the one to really change course from the direction that Bray and Moultrie had set us on with the U.A.P. task force lying before Congress. But Sean Kirkpatrick has just continued the tradition of lying and suppressing UFO information. The U.A.P. report that he released to Congress was nothing but lies. There are only 3 items on there. The numbers of UFO sightings, which was a fraud because he intentionally put in a bunch of cases that had already been explained, just so that and that were conventional mundane explanations like balloons, so that he could say there were more explained cases than unexplained cases. And he also said there were no collisions, and there are collisions, and there were no health effects. And of course, there are health effects. There's, cancers, immune problems, unexplained pregnancies, unexplained pregnancies. I mean, I think we know where they're coming from. Is the alien abduction hybridization program. But of course, there's also good things as well. I don't want to dwell on the negative. I don't want to harp on the negative. Obviously, the negative stuff is what first comes to mind because it's a defensive reflex. If something is negative, we want to defend ourselves. So we do need to be aware of that. But since we co-create so many of these instances, I don't think it's healthy for us to dwell on the negative. And we always have to be mindful of the positive. Go watch Preston Dennett's videos talking about UFO healings, backed up by evidence and witnesses. The beings do heal people. And the phenomenon heals people. I have been healed by the phenomenon, and I'm talking about the greater phenomenon, not necessarily the alien phenomenon, but I myself am an experiencer in a broader sense. And I have received a miraculous healing that cured a crippling chronic physical condition that I've suffered through all my life. And I was just healed of that less than a year ago. It changed my life, guys. And now that wasn't an alien or a UFO, as far as I know. That was more of a metaphysical, spiritual kind of thing. But it was amazing, and it changed my life. So let's see. But yeah, if you're just getting in here, this is Jack with Cosmic Road. I talk about UFOs and the paranormal. Just talking about the latest UFO news that has come out in the recent weeks, and also sharing my latest research, like finding out that Gary Nolan is an alien abductee. That shocked me. I really surprised by that. I don't know why. I mean, he fits the profile, right? Really intelligent guy. Thinks differently, thinks outside the box. Let's see. Troy says, I wonder if abductees serve multiple purposes. Uh, yeah, I think they do. We hear about the hybridization program a lot, and that it seems to be a massive program, a huge operation. But there do seem to be other purposes that the aliens, or the beings, I should say, excuse me, are interested in us as well. There's one incident that I can remember, one experiencer who had his consciousness transferred. He was taken aboard the craft, and he was not part of the hybridization program. He was part of a different program, and they transferred his consciousness into the body of maybe a clone or something. He wasn't quite sure what it was. It wasn't gray, he didn't think. It was larger, and but it wasn't human, and he wasn't even sure if they did this deliberately, but he thought it was deliberately, and almost all other memories of his had been suppressed, even when he went through hypnosis, hypnotic regression. And that's an interesting thing, is that when they really want to make you forget something, they seem to have that ability. There was another instance. So anyway, to finish that point, there are other programs. They're not only restricted to hybridization. And of course, they are teaching people stuff to go by the various researchers who are out there. Of course, there's the two camps, right? There's the two silos that I always talk about. There's the David Jacobs, Bud Hopkins silo, and then there's the Barbara Lamb, Dolores Cannon silo, and they get very different results, right? But in both camps, the aliens or the beings are teaching the abductees or the contactees various things. In the one camp, they're teaching abductees or contactees how to read auras, how to do hands-on healing, how to connect with their higher self, how to communicate telepathically, see things with the third eye. Very, very mystical, warm, cool things, right? Now, in the Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs camp, the beings are teaching people crowd control for when the apocalypse happens. I mean, they don't call it the apocalypse. David Jacobs uses the word the shift. And he says that's the expression that the beings use, or the contactees use. And that the beings have told the contactees that at some point in the near future, there will be something called the shift. And we don't know what that is. It sounds fairly apocalyptic, but during this shift, contactees were trained in crowd control, among other things, for when the UFOs set down on the ground. The contactees are trained when there's mass hysteria because of these apocalyptic events. They are trained to herd people, these panic masses aboard UFOs so they can be lifted off to safety. One hopes, hopefully not a kitchen. You know, I've seen Twilight Zone too many times. To serve man. But I if they wanted to eat us, I think they would just sit down and we would be dinner by now. So I don't think that's what's going on. But yeah, so there are multiple purposes. Obviously, the hybridization program is ongoing, and these people that are being trained for crowd control during the shift are also being hybridized. So even the people that are being hybridized, or their progeny, or the hybrids, they are participants in the hybridization program. Even they serve dual purposes, if you will. And even beyond that, they serve other purposes as well, because when the hybrids reach a certain stage and the more human looking ones will come down to Earth and live on Earth, and they will live with their parents, the contactees or the abductees, or sometimes a different, someone else. There'll be like a little group home. And the parent will be a contactee, or the overseer or whatever of the home will be a contactee or abductee, and they will train the hybrids in how to get along in society, and what a refrigerator is for, what's a microwave, how do you go to the grocery store, and stuff like that. And they it's so weird because the hybrids can control people with their minds. And so you get in situations like you take them to the store and they steal a t-shirt because they don't need to pay for it. They can just mind wipe the clerk to thinking they have already paid for it. And that's one example in the David Jacobs book, Walking Among Us, is that the person that's being hypnotically regressed to remember these encounters and these experiences, who's the abductee or contactee who is teaching the hybrids this sort of thing. And take the hybrids to the store and they'll steal a t-shirt. So anyway, it's crazy. It's crazy. This is Jack. If you wanted to, support the channel, please become a subscriber. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button. Continue chipping in with the super thanks feature or the super chat, or buy one of my books. I'm a novelist. There's a couple of them right there. Link in the description. Let's see. Niall says, Jack, what are your thoughts on Dr. Nolan mentioning he's seen evidence of a biosphere of intelligent life here? Yeah, the whole dark, what do they call it? The dark biome, or the dark, what is it? The dark biosphere. That's weird. That is really weird and fascinating. I think that's what you're talking about, right, Niles? Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, that is a thing that's been going around in the scientific community lately. I don't know a lot about it. So if you know more, let me know. But Niall says, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I don't know a lot of details about that. My wife is a scientist, not me, and I don't think she's looked at that either. But maybe I need to get her to look at that. But yeah, I don't know. What do they call it? The dark biosphere? Or, what's the phrase for that? Is it the invisible biosphere? What do they call it? But yeah, Gary is looking into that, and I think he's being shown the research of other people. I forget who the prominent scientist is that's looking into that. If you remember, let me know. Yeah, but what's the idea of that? That there's this invisible life force that's biological that's on the planet, and is it supposed to be conscious or sentient or interacting with us in a certain way, or is it just all like bacteria and stuff? I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, it's crazy, almost like a spirit entity or world here on Earth. Right, but it's intelligent as well. Okay, very, very interesting. That's crazy. That's crazy. I'm waiting for people like Gary to come out talking about it to give me more information and, hopefully dumb it down a little bit. That'd be nice. Let's see. What other news? Yeah, let's see. Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, let's see. There's some other information on Dr. Gary Nolan's contact experiences. There's an article on howsandwhys.com. Stanford top scientist Gary Nolan had 3 alien UFO encounters. I've covered that. I haven't covered this article. I'm kind of curious to see if there's anything new. His third interaction, he says, I was a graduate student at Stanford. I was in a used bookstore and buying science fiction books. I came across 2 books. One was by John Mack and the other was Whitley Strieber. Oh, that's when he saw the cover of Whitley's book. Yeah, man, so many people were triggered by that. That awoke so many memories and struck such a chord in so many people. I mean, if anybody doubts Whitley's experiences, and just look at all the people that single image had a massive impact on. And that's proof right there, as far as I'm concerned, because he worked very closely with the artist. Yeah. Let's see. Next, let's see. This is Newton. Who's Newton? Is that talking about Gary? I think they mean Nolan. I think that was a typo. He discusses the work the research he's been doing with the basal ganglia and caudate pitumen regions of the brain. And he eventually gets into the conversation on the highly functioning breeding groups of humans based on objective evidence of highly dense neural connections within those particular regions. Those areas of the brain are involved in motor control, planning, intuition, anticipation, and downstream executive function. Yeah, that's crazy that people that have close contact with the phenomenon seem to have their brains altered, or their brains were already different from the norm before the contact. They have these denser regions of what is it, the caudate putamen? I can never say that word. What is it? The caudate putamen. And Gary says that he believes that has to do with intuition, and having a denser portion of that brain gives people greater intuition, which leads to possibly remote viewing abilities and other things like that. So, is that the organic component for like a connection to spirit kind of thing? Like a third eye kind of thing. People talk about the pineal gland being the physical counterpart of the third eye. Might the caudate putamen be part of that equation as well? That's what I'm thinking, because a lot of this stuff has a physical counterpart. The spiritual or metaphysical has overlays with the physical and has a direct involvement with the physical. I went to my Reiki instructor recently and had some Reiki done on me, and she said there were holes in my aura. And though she healed those, but those had been caused by my severe lifelong crippling physical condition that I had, that I was healed of with during my one of my ayahuasca ceremonies, my first retreat. And so that is one example of the spiritual interacting with the physical. And I think it can go the other way as well. It did in that case. The physical interacted with the spiritual, and actually there were holes in my aura caused by this lifelong illness and condition. So very interesting. So what does that mean for the caudate putamen? I give up. Caudate putamen. Oh God. Okay, I'm looking it up again. Caudate putamen. Putamen. Yeah. So Is the caudate putamen part of the third eye apparatus? Does that have any link to the pineal gland, either physically or metaphysically? Does that have any link to our third eye? Because what is being described with this denser region of the brain in contactees sounds an awful lot like something that could be related to the third eye. Greater intuition, ability to do remote viewing, etc. Um, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. I would love to see more research done on that, and not just looking at it from a scientific point of view. I think you got to think outside the box on this stuff. I think Gary is willing to think at least somewhat outside the box on this. He does seem to have somewhat of a more mainstream sciencey outlook on stuff, but he is willing to be more open-minded than perhaps an Avi Loeb would. So I really appreciate that. Niall says, any thoughts about Pentagon talking about mothership possible? What is this about? Did they really mention this? Yeah, well, I just was talking about that in the paper written by Avi Loeb and Sean Kirkpatrick. And if you're just joining me, this is Jack with Cosmic Road. Please hit like, please subscribe, chip in if you would like to support the channel with the super chat. And talking about UFO news. Yeah, super chats and stuff like that really do keep me motivated to keep doing these. So consider doing that. But yeah, so that's worth talking about, the mothership, right? That really is. So I will poo-poo that paper forever that Sean wrote with Avi Loeb, because it minimizes and restricts the phenomenon to what can be conventionally understood and explained by modern science. And this stuff is so far beyond modern science. Humans would be turned into liquid if they were in these vehicles that could do these amazing maneuvers. So, and there's portals. I've shared a couple of videos of portals opening up and craft coming out of them. And there's all sorts of just crazy, crazy stuff. The hitchhiker effect at Skinwalker Ranch, that can, stuff that cannot be explained by any known possible science. So in that paper, Avi Loeb and Sean Kirkpatrick tried to advance the idea that we can only, or we should approach the study of UFOs with our understanding of conventional physics and science. And in that paper, they talked about maybe some of these objects that we're seeing were dropped as probes or drones from a mothership. And that got everybody talking. The Pentagon is talking about a mothership. They are taking the concept of a mothership seriously and putting this in a scientific paper. And you know what? That's pretty cool. I gotta say, I will poo-poo that paper forever and look down on Sean Kirkpatrick forever for using Avi Loeb to minimize and suppress UFO information through this paper, and throwing a wrench in the monkey works and slowing everything down, trying to get people to look at it through conventional physics, through the lens of conventional physics. That's what that paper, the idea that paper was trying to advance, instead of looking at it outside of the box, like people like Gary Nolan are doing to a limited extent. Instead, it was looking at it in that conventional way. But in that paper, they talked about a possible mothership, and it got everybody talking about that. And so that is cool. That did continue the conversation. That did further the conversation. I think it also restricted the conversation to the lens of conventional physics. And that's where I think that I don't want to get too excited about the Pentagon talking about a mothership, because the real headline to me there is that they're trying to approach this all through conventional physics. And I think that is, you're not going to understand it that way. You might, I think that it's valuable to approach it to look at it in part through conventional physics, because if you can do that, and if you can, develop equations and math and whatever to explain this stuff, you might evolve our own science. So I think that is valuable to look at it in part through that lens. But there's so much weirdness and metaphysical and anomalous stuff and just highly advanced technology that that doesn't operate the way we could possibly understand. I think that's the wrong approach, and it's setting people down a wrong path that's going to waste time and money, which I think is what Sean wanted. So yeah, so I'm really glad it got people talking, and that is really cool. But that's my take on it. I think that was all by design, to slow the conversation, not further the conversation. But that's just my thought. Risby says in the near future, we might have PhD researchers like Loeb who don't work through a department but still get funding. The first person doing so this year is Eric Hole, a brain consciousness theorist. Okay, I would be very interested in that because from my experience, my very limited experience, granted, but from my experience, it's consciousness based, and a lot of it is. I think there is a nuts and bolts component to it. There are physical craft and physical beings, but so much of it is not, mundane physics as we understand it, and a lot of it is consciousness based. So yeah, that is the right approach, I think, or at least a right approach. Again, I think there should be multiple approaches used, some conventional, some non-conventional. But yes, I would love to see what he comes up with. Eric Hoel, Hoel. I don't know how to pronounce that. Hoel. Yes, well, let me read that as comment again. And in the near future, we might have PhD researchers like Loeb who don't work through a department but still get funding. Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. As long as they're getting funding and they're doing legitimate research, that is going to continue and further the conversation. So yeah, I really look forward to seeing what Eric comes up with. Um, okay, Eric is apparently not into UFOs. Just an example of being independent. Okay, so he's if he's not into UFOs, what is his research involve? Is it just more exploring consciousness? Is that kind of what he's doing? Yeah, let me know because that sounds intriguing. We need more studies of consciousness. We I mean that seems to be a massive part of in what is going on. That really really does. So um, anyway, what other questions you've got, guys? It's been about an hour, and let's see what other talking points do I have? Yeah, James Fox has some really interesting information that he just came out with. The Virginia aliens spoke, or at least one of them did. Obviously, it didn't speak with words or not with its lips. It spoke telepathically, and it said that it pitied humans who didn't know their own potential. Was it being sincere? Is this a parting shot from a dying being? You have killed me, but I stab at thee. I pity thee for being such wimpy, poor guys who don't even know what you are. Or was he legitimately lamenting that we don't know who we are? Could be either way. But yeah, if we're talking about the Virginia Brazil case, covered in James Fox's excellent documentary Moment of Contact. And James has recently gone on record saying that one of the beings recovered during this incident actually communicated with one of the doctors working on it, and communicated telepathically that it pitied humans who didn't know their own potential. And of course, the rest of the story is the U.S. government got involved, as they probably do most of the time, and they retrieved the downed UFO as well as the beings. I don't think either were alive at the time they were retrieved, but I'm not sure about that. But yeah, so really, really interesting. And that sentiment that being said is echoed by other beings and other occasions. That seems to be kind of a common refrain, the being saying that we're capable of a lot more. And some say we're even more powerful in some ways than they are. One told one contactee that although the being's telepathic abilities and mental abilities are extremely powerful in a short range, ours is not as focused or as powerful in a short range, but it can actually reach to the other end of the universe. And theirs can't. It's very localized, according to what that one being told that one experiencer. So that is something that you get from time to time in the research when you study contact experiences. And I'm fascinated by those. I'm sure you guys are as well. Other news: Canada launches its own UFO program, which is really cool. We need as many, all hands on board, guys. Maybe somebody will get it right. Somebody will crack the code, or at least approach the study of UFOs in an honest way without the BS that people like Sean Kirkpatrick are doing. If they're legitimately trying to get to the bottom of this instead of just covering up for the control group or whatever it is that Sean Kirkpatrick is doing. Other big news: Arrow is not fully funded. The All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the big UFO program just created by the Pentagon, is not fully funded. Uh, and there's apparently only like three people there. And so, as much as I despise Sean Kirkpatrick, if Arrow is going to have any hope at all in getting to the bottom of this, they're going to need to be fully funded. Of course, they're also going to need a director that doesn't lie to the American people. So they need both of those things. They need a new director and they need some cash. Yeah, so that's another big news item. And here's a juicy one. On an interview, I think it was on Weaponized, the podcast with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp. They had Colm Kelleher on, who I love Colm Kelleher. I mean, he's been involved in some really interesting stuff, and he has really helped further the conversation because he helped author the book, The Hunt for the Skinwalker, as well as Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. And the research he's done at Skinwalker Ranch is just amazing and mind blowing, and the things that he's been involved in and has been a witness to. Well, apparently he has studied cattle mutilations, of course, because they occurred at Skinwalker Ranch. And he says that both humans and aliens, or the beings, are responsible for cattle mutilations. It's not just one or the other, it's both. So, what the hell, right? What does that mean? Does that mean they are both mutilating cows for the same reason? Or is something else going on there? Uh, you know, uh, I know what he's talking about. I've seen some of the research where like a hypodermic needle was found under one of the mutilated cows, the kinds that veterinarians use. So obviously humans were involved there, or that was some sort of planted evidence potentially, right? Um, but so many of these mutilations, the majority of them, if not the vast majority of them, seem to be more anomalous. In humans couldn't do the sorts of things that were done to these cattle, where there is a sac around the hearts of the cows, and the hearts were removed without penetrating the sac, as if they were just like teleported out. And all sorts of various anomalies in the cattle mutilations that clearly weren't done by humans, at least not humans that we know. Could they have been done by the breakaway civilization with alien technology, or time travelers, or something like that? Germans on the moon? You never know. You can't rule it out. But a lot of these cases are seen with a UFO, either on the site at the time or within a day or two of the mutilation. So the beings are definitely involved in these mutilations. I think we can say that 100%. But some of them seem to have been caused by people, by humans. So were the people doing the same sorts of things the aliens were doing to find out what the aliens were doing? And of course, I'm using the word alien in a general sense. Don't, come at me saying, oh, they could be ultra terrestrials. Just using that as a word. But yeah, so what is up with that? What does that mean? Do you guys have any clue, any ideas? Oh, whoa, Troy, man, thank you so much. That's awesome, dude. Really appreciate that. Yeah, it rocks, dude. Thanks for the super chat. Yeah, what do you guys think? What is up with the cattle mutilations? Do y'all, why are people doing it? I mean, I don't know why the aliens are doing it. There are various theories about recovering genetic material. Possibly, Linda Moulton Howe advanced the theory a couple of days ago, um, that they may have been used, the beings may use material recovered from the cattle to create the clones, like the small grays. There's different sorts of grays. In fact, there's a wide variety of grays, but there's the two main types, right? There's the small ones and the big ones. And the small ones, pretty much everyone that's encountered them universally says they are clones or biological androids, or they're mechanical in some way, biological mechanical. Philip J. Corso said the same thing in the book The Day After Roswell, and in fact, he even has a chapter devoted to an autopsy of one. Although, in fairness, I don't know if that being is really a gray in the way that we think of it. It had a different face and skull shape. It had a different number of fingers. Is that one of the various variations on the gray? Because there are a wide variation on the grays. Or is that a completely different race? I don't know. But he did have a chapter devoted to the autopsy of it. And it was weird. Its brain was magnetically or electromagnetically aligned. Yeah, his brain was electromagnetically aligned. Whatever that means, he didn't go into any detail. I wish he had expounded on that point, but he didn't. But also its skin seems to have been specifically designed to interact with the suit that it wore, and also the field generated by the ship itself. So the being was like a living part of the ship in a way. And that's interesting when you pair it with David Jacobs' research, which indicated that the telepathic abilities of the beings diminished the further they were from the ship. Interesting, right? But that wasn't the case with the hybrids. The hybrids, different deal. Hybrids, fully telepathic, fully powerful, wherever they were. So that seems to have been an advancement in the hybrids over the whatever, if the grays were the source or whatever. Troy says captured soldiers try not to give sensitive intel to the enemy. Being in Brazil seems to have given a very vague and powerful message to the doctors that seems like misdirection, using confusion as a weapon. Absolutely, man. Absolutely. The beings, they have a bad reputation for honesty. They lie. They really do. They'll tell people anything. They have told people so many different versions of their origin story. And what's weird is different races will say the same thing. They'll have a different version of the story. There'll be alterations on it, but the grays will typically say stuff like we're people from the future. We've damaged our genetic tissue and we have to come back to you guys to help us repair our genes. Or they'll, in the book The Voyagers by Ashiana Dean, who gives us big picture view of all this kind of stuff with the dimensions and all the law of one kind of stuff. Well, they're beings from the future. They're not us, but they're related to us, and they're from an alternate reality. And there's various versions of that story. There's various ways that goes. And then, and those are the grays. And then there is the interesting incident by Nick Redfern, related in one of his books, where more human looking beings with hair, they claim to have come from the distant past, but they had damaged themselves with genetic manipulation or wars or whatever, and again needed us to repair their genes. So that's what they. So in the totally different race, right? So we have different races saying the same thing, and we have, but in different ways, right? We're you from the future. We're kind of you from the future, but from an alternate reality. We're here, to repair ourselves. And there's various versions of that story and that storyline, that I guess I should say that narrative, all of which is to paint a picture of themselves as weak and needing us. We are important to them. That is the narrative they're trying to get across. Don't fear us. We're weak. We're dying. We're a dying race, and we need you. You are powerful, and you are salvation. So that's the idea they're trying to get across. But obviously, the ways they're getting it across are lies, right? Because they're telling so many different versions of the story, and it's across multiple races. So they're not all telling the truth, right? So yeah, so beings lie. Beings absolutely lie. It'd be so nice if we could trust the phenomenon. Wouldn't that make our lives so much easier, if the phenomenon were honest with us, or at least were better liars? If they had like a consistent narrative, that they would tell, that they would, tell their troops, if you're captured or if you encounter people and they're afraid, tell them this. And they all said the same thing, but they don't say the same thing, which seems to indicate that there are multiple races visiting us, possibly for similar reasons, possibly for very different reasons. And, but but yeah, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. Let's see. Lex says thoughts on Tucker Carlson, Full Sin podcast, where he talks about UFOs. Yeah, man. Okay, so I'm actually going to do another video about that. I'm going to do probably a video tomorrow about that. Really a cool interview with Tucker. I mean, Tucker's on the stuff. Uh, he was saying stuff I didn't know about Gary Nolan, and I'm really going to have to rewatch that interview again to get it. But according to Tucker, Gary was and I don't know how this escaped my attention. Honestly, this is so huge how Gary Nolan got involved with this, but because of his research into brains, he was recruited by the government to study people who had their brains damaged and who had been killed by UFOs that specifically were targeting nuclear missile sites. So I'm going to have to rewatch that interview again. So I'm giving you correct information. But my memory of what Tucker Carlson said is that hundreds of people had been killed by UFOs, and their brains damaged, killed and/or their brains damaged. I think he said hundreds killed, but it could have been and/or. And anyway, but that's why Gary Nolan was recruited, and that makes sense with his interest in brainology. Again, my wife is the scientist. I write science fiction. Yeah. So that's crazy. So if that's the interview that you're talking about, Lex, that's a fantastic interview with Tucker, and he really goes on even more than about that. I could probably get two videos about that, at least two videos out of that interview, because he's well read. The dude has done his research, and he is really interested in this. And I don't care what your politics are, but the dude knows his stuff, and he is on it, and not just on it, but he has been pushing this agenda. He has been leading the charge. I dare say that without him making this acceptable for mainstream news anchors to talk about, nobody in the mainstream news would be talking about it, or at least a lot fewer of them. So he's got guts, and he's a smart guy, and he's done his research, and he's really into it. And I really admire that. I mean, I don't care what your politics are. I hope that you agree that that's a really gutsy thing for him to do, and that he has made a big contribution to the ufology. Absolutely. Daniel Christensen says cattle meat is used in microbiology as a base material. Of course, I feel, I'm sorry, I'll get back to that point, but I feel like I have to balance that politically by saying that we also wouldn't have any of this going on without the efforts of, Harry Reid. And, Kirsten Gillibrand has made a huge impact on this as well. And it's, Podesta. Sorry. He's kind of a creepy guy, but his early interactions with Tom DeLonge probably did some good as well with TTSA, without whom we might not be having this conversation. I wouldn't be involved in this without TTSA, without those 3 videos that they released that Lou and Chris knuckled out to them. Anyway, so I just wanted to kind of balance the political scale, saying it's on both sides. Both sides have done really good and advanced the cause. So, yeah. But yeah, Daniel says cattle meat is used in microbiology as a base material. Interesting. Interesting. So you think maybe that's what's going on, is they're using the cattle meat? Of course, I have to just push back on that a little bit, saying that they don't just use the meat; they use like the cheeks and the weird organs. It's not just like a hunk of rib or something. But I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just, it is interesting, the parts of the body they take, the sphincter, the sex glands. I mean, they core out the sphincter. And yeah, I mean, they want the butt. I'm sorry, but they go after the sex glands and other stuff. So yeah. Risby says, I wonder about the question about how we develop trust with a large degree of asymmetrical information and power. Yes, exactly. How can we trust these guys? They can tell us anything, and we can't argue with them, or there's nothing we can do about it, right? Because they have all the power. So, Philip J. Corso in his book, The Day After Roswell, it's all about trying to get more of an even playing field, right? It's about reverse engineering alien technology so that we can fight back. And that's the ultimate premise and narrative of the book, The Day After Roswell, which is, foundational for me, or very, very important for me and my understanding. And I think for a lot of people. But the whole idea and the framing of the book was, we are getting this technology and we are going to reverse engineer it to develop weapons to use against UFOs if need be. And the book ends. I mean, the whole book is about reverse engineering the technology, and it ends with us finally developing weapons that can be used against the UFOs and ultimately using them. So, but there are so many stories from even before the incident that he describes, where we use the energy beam, or whatever, the particle beam that was developed. There are incidences prior to that where people have talked about shooting down UFOs, and these are fairly credible people. And so why did we need the energy beam? Anyway, I don't know the answer to that, but yeah. So that idea that we need to be able to defend ourselves and to stand on our own 2 feet against any malicious intent on the part of the phenomenon is well taken. And it seems like there are people in the government working on that. But again, as I've talked about so many times, it also seems like we're working with the beings, right? There are some elements of the government or contractors, whoever, the control group, whoever they are, that seem to, in the present or in the past, be working with the beings. Um, so, are we shooting at beings that the beings that we're working with don't like? Are we pawns in some sort of cosmic chess game or conflict? Um, I don't know, but yeah, no, absolutely. Your point is well taken. Yeah. Phil the cat says Tucker thinks they came from under the oceans. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's what he said. And there's a lot of evidence to back that up. There's so many UFOs that are seen coming and going from the oceans, but there's and I think our evidence on this is sketchy because I don't think they've released a lot of the satellite footage that might show objects coming and going from the atmosphere. And again, like I've talked about, the wormholes and the portals, they may not need to traverse 3D space to get here. I have seen a few satellite videos that seem to show objects coming in from outer space, but just a few, just a handful. So Tucker, when he says there's a lot more coming and going from the oceans than from space, that's a good point. That's a good point. But I would push back just a little, saying that they also seem to be able to portal in. So maybe we wouldn't catch them coming and going from space with our satellites. So just a thought. But yeah, I there seems to be a lot of massive involvement in the oceans. So that's a good point. And um, the submarine information that has some of the data seems like it's even more like pigeonholed than the airplanes, the jets. Um, it's even harder to get information out of the submarines and the Navy and in that case the underwater stuff than it is the above water stuff. So they're hiding something for some reason. When the government hides something, it means there's something going on, right? They're not hiding it for no reason. Yeah. They might have bases down there, Phil the Cat says. Yes, I think they do. I think they do. I think they've got bases down there, either in the ocean or on the ocean floor, or else they're using the water to come and go, and they have bases, in the earth, below the ocean. Or it could be both. Very possibly both. Yeah, so yeah, but there's something going on. There is definitely something going on with the oceans. I would love to know more. Are we talking like The Abyss, the James Cameron movie, The Abyss? Love that movie. One of my favorite movies. And it's got these aliens living in a city, this really cool, colorful city on the ocean floor. And humans try to nuke them. Sorry, spoiler, but it's like a 30-year-old movie. And humans try to nuke them, and they aren't real happy about it. And in the director's cut of the movie, they contemplate, or they actually send tidal waves to destroy all humanity in retaliation for trying to nuke them. And the love of one man and for his woman convinces them that humanity is worth saving. So a good message. Good message. A really good movie. Got some awesome stuff in there. Got a battle between two submersibles, a chase scene. It's got a great fight scene with the yeah, it's a good movie. I love James Cameron. Not a huge fan of Avatar 2 though. I was disappointed in that movie. They had like 10 years to make that. They couldn't make a better movie. So it's a nature documentary. That's a very nice nature documentary, but it's a nature documentary. Anyway, I could rant about Avatar 2. Lex says the oceans would provide them a lot of protection. They'd see us coming from a mile away. Absolutely. It's a great place to harbor an advanced race that doesn't have to worry about the sorts of things that we would have to worry about, breathing, and getting around. So it makes perfect sense. Now, there's so much life and sustenance down there. And if they can traverse space or wormholes, of course they could live underwater. Troy says, would the aliens protect its ally humans that are helping them against foreign adversaries? That's a great question. And that is something that the beings have told people is that in the advent of a nuclear war, a major nuclear war, not necessarily just dropping one bomb, but a full-on nuclear war, the beings say they will intervene and they will not allow Earth or Gaia to be destroyed. But there's a price to be paid, and that's that we will no longer be the stewards of our own destiny. So it sounds like if they have to intervene, they're going to take control. And we don't know what that's going to look like. Um, you know, these are guys that have no compunction about wiping people's minds and lying and doing shady stuff, as well as the good stuff. Again, I do want to highlight that there's so much good from the phenomenon. I mean, we are still here after all. There's so many cases of them healing people and other stuff, teaching people how to read auras and get in touch with their higher self and all sorts of good, more mystical stuff that is coming from the phenomenon. I think it's very important to highlight that and to keep mentioning that because from my own experiences and from my research, we seem to co-create these events. Many of these anomalous events are interacting with our consciousness, or it's our consciousness interacting with the field. John Keel believed there was this field that we are interacting with and maybe manifesting stuff from. And I don't know if that's true, but we do seem to be co-creating a lot of these experiences. So I think it's very important to co-create positive experiences if at all possible. So think about the good stuff about the phenomenon as much as you can. We do need to prepare ourselves and defend ourselves, so we can't turn a blind eye to the negative stuff. But I want you guys to have positive experiences if you're conducting CE5 or something like that. So, so don't be afraid. Don't think about it from an alarmist or negative point of view. Just want to put that out there. But yeah. I forgot where I was going to that. Yeah, Philly Cat says love that movie as well. Yeah, I'm a huge James Cameron fan. I wish he would go back to his earlier kind of movies like Terminator and Aliens. I love the early James Cameron more than I love the modern James Cameron. But anyway, does anybody else have any questions or thoughts? I've been going for about an hour and a half, almost out of water. But I'm happy. I've got a few more sips left, so I'm happy to talk for a little while longer. Risby says, speaking of the field, have you read Itzhak Bentov? No, I haven't. Oh, Stalking the Wild Pendulum. I have heard about that. That sounds like a really intriguing book. No, I haven't read that. Risby keeps saying, I like the idea that we each are like the two lasers that create a hologram interference pattern. Very interesting. Okay. No, I've heard multiple times about Stalking the Wild Pendulum, and that sounds like something that I would enjoy reading and get something out of. It really does. If you're just joining us, this is Jack with Cosmic Road. I haven't done a channel break in a while. Please hit like, please subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified of future videos. And let me know what you're thinking. Comment below and consider leaving a super thanks or a super chat or buying one of my books. There's a link in the description. I'm a writer. But yeah, does anybody have any final thoughts? Let me see if there were any news items that I haven't gotten to. Ross Coulthard says that the Air Force is hiding UFO data. Absolutely. He is harping on the Air Force, and so is Chris Mellon. And so I'm glad people are holding their feet to the fire. Hopefully we will get something out of them. The Air Force has been hiding this stuff for a long time. Are they going to pony up now? That'd be nice. That'd be nice. Yeah, another recent video I made was talking about how we engage with UFOs, sometimes firing on them, sometimes escorting them. about how the U.S. military is engaging with UFOs, whether peacefully or not. And I had comments from Lou Elizondo, Ross Coulthart, and Sean Cahill, all talking about that. So I think that it's good to keep in mind that the U.S. government is not only working with beings, but also shooting at some of them, and they know so much and are keeping so much from us. And Balloon Gate, of course, is still unexplained. I don't know what was going on with the Balloon Gate. If they were just balloons, why didn't they release the camera footage of them shooting down the balloons? If it was a hobbyist or some private company or private enterprise and it was a scientific study balloon, somebody would have come forward by now saying, hey, you shot down our balloon. Nobody said that. And why did they call off the search for all three of those incidents? I'm not counting the original Chinese spy balloon, but the three that followed it that were shot down, two in the US and one in Canada. The search for the wreckage was publicly called off for all three. What does that mean? I could buy one or two of those searches being called off. Their remote locations, etc., under the water, but all three just smacks of some shenanigans. They are hiding something. So what? Did they actually shoot down three actual UFOs? I mean, like I say, they've done it before. At least they fired on them, and there is evidence to indicate they've actually brought some down. So I don't know. Troy says, I want to know what Ross knows. What would cause panic, like he claims? Yeah, exactly. Um, Lex says, any idea when the next hearings will be? Soon, I hope. I mean, people keep on saying it's going to be right around the corner. And, we'll see. We'll see. All right. Well, I'm out of water, guys. I think I'm ready to call it a night. But thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. And see you guys next time. Have a great Sunday. All right. This is Jack with Cosmic Road signing off. Hit like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Okay. Till next time.